This is Kirk. He suffered from depression for 5 years. He tried antidepressants, talking therapy, and nothing helped. In May 2015 at Imperial College, he was given psilocybin, also known as magic mushrooms, and since that time, he has been depression-free. This is Ben. He suffered from depression for 30 years, and in that time, he tried everything: CBT, group therapy, a list of medications prescribed to him by his doctor, and nothing helped. In June 2015, he was given psilocybin, and since that time, he has been depression-free. Not only have the symptoms of his depression gone, but in the last year, he has done an acting course, a printing course, he's flown on a plane for the first time in a decade, and his career and social life are flourishing. I can't show you his face because magic mushrooms are an illegal psychedelic drug, and he's asked to remain anonymous. Magic mushrooms. You might think of the 60s, dropping out, jumping out of windows thinking you can fly. You might think of going crazy. Quite the opposite of what magic mushrooms did to Ben and to Kirk. And despite its bad reputation, we need to ask the question, what does this mushroom know that we don't? What does it do that we can't? I'm a clinical psychologist at the Psychedelic Research Group at Imperial. It's a vibrant group of scientists and clinicians asking these very unconventional questions in a most conventional way.
Hi, our study is called Increased Amygdala Responses to Emotional Phases After Psilocybin for Treatment-Resistant Depression. The study is a quasi-experimental study evaluating the antidepressant action of psilocybin on amygdala responses to emotional phases. Psilocybin is the active ingredient in what's known as magic mushrooms. So our authors propose that psilocybin, in conjunction with psychological support or talk therapy, is a treatment approach that potentially revives emotional responsiveness in depression, enabling patients to reconnect with their emotions. And this is in comparison to traditional treatments using SSRIs or antidepressants, which has a side effect of dampening emotional response to stimuli. So again, psilocybin is an active ingredient in certain types of mushrooms that can produce psychedelic or hallucinogenic effects. It was marketed in the 50s and 60s for mental health support, however, eventually was banned due to political pressures. So psilocybin research is gaining traction in psychiatry as a potentially effective treatment for depression, end-of-life anxiety, OCD, and addiction. It's been associated with improved mood even days after exposure. So our study is one of many looking specifically at psilocybin's effect as an antidepressant and the response of the amygdala to that. So our key research question, will the amygdala responses to emotional phases be altered post-treatment with psilocybin, and does this relate to changes in depression severity? Our authors hypothesize that it would be altered post-treatment with psilocybin, which would be promising in helping to alleviate depression without the side effects or emotional blunting that SSRIs typically have. So does this study address a compelling question? Well, yes and no. It is compelling in that it demonstrates the value of continuing to study psilocybin as a potential treatment for depression. But as for the question asked in this specific study, it's not necessarily compelling since it's just a piece of a larger amount of research that have already concluded that there is some value to studying psilocybin for antidepressant effect. So this study may not have answered a novel question, but certainly adds support to previously addressed questions about psilocybin's effectiveness. So our design and sampling. So again, this study is quasi-experimental. The sample size is 20 participants, which were selected by criterion sampling. All of the participants did receive identical treatment. So to be included in the study, participants had to have a diagnosis of major depression as indicated by the Hamilton Depression Rating Scale. They also had to have no improvement after 2 courses of antidepressant treatment, with each course being over 6 weeks. This would also indicate that they are treatment resistant as they would have failed treatment with SSRIs. So participants were asked to be antidepressant free for at least 2 weeks before this study, meaning that they could not be taking SSRIs 2 weeks beforehand. So our our sample size is 20, which was made up of 14 males, 6 females. The average age was about 44.7, but the age range was from 27 to 64. So out of the 20 participants, 19 completed both the scanning sessions. So to start out, participants attended a 4-hour preparatory session with their therapist prior to participation. These sessions encouraged patients to openly discuss their views on the origins of their depression. It also informed them of any psychological effects of psilocybin, and it simulated what dosing sessions would look like in the study. So all participants underwent 2 psilocybin-assisted therapy sessions 1 week apart. The first session was kind of a trial run, so they were given a low dose of 10 milligrams PO, and this was to help prepare for the higher therapeutic dose. The rationale behind this was to encourage rapport with the therapist and to reduce anxiety, also to see and to make sure that participants could tolerate the dosing. So the second session was our actual research study, and that's when they were given the therapeutic dose of 25 milligrams PO. Both sessions took place in a relaxed atmosphere with participants laying down with eyes closed while music played. So before any treatment was administered, and this means talk therapy or the psilocybin, an fMRI imaging was done to obtain a baseline. Afterwards, psilocybin was administered, and patients were then shown the series of emotional faces. And these ranged from fearful, happy, and neutral. So the fearful would represent the negative emotions, happy, the positive. Each face was presented for 3 seconds on screen. Patients were instructed to press a button when each new face appeared to indicate that they were paying attention. During this as well, this whole session lasted about 8 minutes total, and there were also rest blocks where no face was present, just to sort of act as a control.
Research measures. So as we can recall from previous coursework, the independent variable is the variable that is manipulated during the experiment. It will cause or explain the dependent variable. The dependent variable is what gets measured. In this example, the independent variable is the intake of psilocybin. As previously discussed, a low dose of 10 milligrams was given to the participants to adjust to the psilocybin. The higher dose of 25 milligrams was the dose that was reflected in the fMRI scans, therefore making this the independent variable. After the administration of psilocybin during therapy sessions, the participants were shown faces of different emotions, fearful, happy, or neutral. Their brain's responses, specifically in the amygdala, were studied using fMRI scans. This was the dependent variable in the study, as it is affected by the manipulation of the independent variable. Reliability and validity are 2 key ways of analyzing a study. Reliability can also be thought of as the consistency of the study. It is determined by whether the results of the study can be generalized to other similar studies. Validity, also known as accuracy, refers to whether the study actually measures what it claims to. For this study in particular, there are fairly low levels of both reliability and validity. There is no evidence of similar studies being done since this study was conducted, therefore showing low reliability. There is, however, an increasing level of interest in this topic. This may lead to future research and repeat studies. As far as validity goes, the control factors that the authors imposed indicates high validity. Inclusion and exclusion factors were strict in order to select participants for the study. On the other hand, the small sample size and lack of a control group during the experiment indicates low validity.
Data analysis. Our study had 2 hypotheses. Hypothesis number 1. Amygdala response will be higher to faces expressing fear, happiness, and neutrality after the combined high-dose psilocybin and talk therapy treatment. Analytical approach. 2 measures were used to determine significance via brain scan. The first was calculating the mean amygdala signal for combined right and left amygdalas. The second was a whole brain scan. The data was then put into a standard general linear model. A statistical threshold of z is greater than 2.3 with a p-score of 0.05 was applied to a two-tailed t-test, which tries to address false negative and false positives on both sides of the data farthest away from the mean. After 10 trials, a statistical significance test could be done giving the results of the 3 types of faces with p-scores of fearful having a p-score of 0.001, happy faces having a p-score of 0.022, and neutral faces having a p-score of 0.06. Likewise, 3 scores were given for the left amygdala signals, with fearful faces giving a p-score of 0.11, happy faces giving a p-score of 0.95, and neutral faces giving a p-score of 0.2. Because the happy faces and the neutral faces on the right side and all of the faces on the left side of the amygdala gave p-scores that were relatively high, all the data was thrown out except for the p-score for the right amygdala signals for faces that demonstrated fear, showing that at least that there was statistical significance of more amygdala response for fearful faces after treatment than before. Appropriate approach. With the study acknowledging the issues of the small sample and tossing out most of the results because of it, it seems the researchers have prioritized validity over trying to prove their hypothesis. Since no one in our group is qualified to comment on how accurately MRIs measure amygdala responses, we decided to approve the study approaches. As you can see from the data, they had the combined mean z-scores of the right amygdala signals. You can see with the fearful, happy, and neutral that the amygdala responses went up after treatment than before. But because the happy and the neutral responses were thrown away, you can see, at least with the fearful responses, that there's a higher right amygdala signal after the talk therapy and psilocybin treatment than before. They also did a test with the whole brain scan. With the whole brain scan, as you can see here, they have the right amygdala highlighted. You can see, at least in the fearful one, that the the volume in millimeters cubed has increased in the amygdala as it was seen in the fearful faces after treatment. Hypothesis 2. Psilocybin promotes emotional connection to internal stimuli compared to emotional avoidance as often reported with antidepressant medication. Analytical approach. Qualitative self-reporting was asked by the members who took the study at the end of the study whether the treatment was beneficial and how it affected them. Appropriate approach. It was a good idea to provide a qualitative element to the study because not much is known about linking MRI activity to how it affects people's internal emotions. So it was good to get the qualitative score in conjunction with the quantitative MRI scans. Result. The researcher stated that a majority of participants thought that the treatment was helpful in making emotional confrontation more likely, leading to patients achieving an emotional breakthrough and resolution. Unfortunately, the researchers did not specify how many patients gave this statement, but only that it was a majority.
So there are many strengths and weaknesses to the study. Starting with strengths and specifically the design of the study, it is very coherent and easy to follow, and it frequently cites existing literature on the topic. Additionally, pre-test and post-test analyses demonstrate the effectiveness of psilocybin treatment. Considering the sample, participants were introduced to a low dose of psilocybin to prepare them for higher treatment dosing and to discern if participants would be able to tolerate treatment. Considering the measures of the study, the authors used multiple methods of measuring responses to treatment, including 2 depression inventories, qualitative interviewing, and fMRI scans. And lastly, the analysis. The authors acknowledged in the conclusion that the sample size was too small and the study was inherently flawed due to the ethical restrictions of giving patients psilocybin. The study, more so than proving psilocybin is beneficial to treatment of resistant depression, demonstrates that it would be beneficial to expand studying the effects of psilocybin on depression. So as for the weaknesses, like I just said, there is no control group to compare results, and there is a very small sample size. Only 20 people were used. This is too small to be significant, and the sample size additionally was not randomly selected. Considering the measures, it did not look at longer-term effects of treatment. There was a large portion of the data which was self-reported using depression inventory scales, and different P-scores were used to analyze the data of faces. For example, fear-expressed faces, happy faces, and neutral faces used 3 different P-scores. As far as the analysis, the authors proposed that treatment with psilocybin is safe, rapid, and potentially enduring in its antidepressant action, despite limited scope of study. And finally, as far as the results, their qualitative results were not listed. It was just summarized and used mostly self-reported data. So overall, as we said, there are strengths and weaknesses to the study, and just like we said previously, there is a very high increasing demand for interest in the topic, and there's likely to be future studies done as well. Thanks for watching.